I'm taking a look today at a pond that we put in 2 winters ago during a really deep cold freeze. We rented a skid steer for a weekend and moved a huge amount of material. And here's this pond in our 6-acre landscape. After a few years, it's at full to overflowing. And so in this video, what I'd like to do is, with the help of the snow, get a sense of how water's moving into this pond, out of this pond, where some of the potential pitfalls and issues are, and then actually document using a shovel to modify and work on spillways and waterways and make sure the pond is secure and good. So that's what I'm going to get into in this video. If you're interested in the background of how this pond came to be, as well as imagery or documentation of the process of digging it, I'm going to link here to some videos where we documented that. It was a fun project. It was really inexpensive to rent a skid steer. Most people would use an excavator, but we wanted to move material far from here. So we've got bulk material for making a root cellar later on. We have all sorts of hugel mounds, which we'll look at in the spring when they come into production from scraping the topsoil. We're even able to move a ton of shale to a future home building site. So the skid steer was, I think, a nice tool. We used an excavator later on as needed to reinforce the berm. I will link to that here so that you can see that video if you're interested in that. This pond serves as a water catchment device for a pretty significant amount of water that would otherwise just be running simply through this landscape, through a common ditch and out. It still does that now that it's overflowing. We'll look at that in a moment, but it allows us to hold a pretty significant amount of water in the middle of the forest here. There's some issues with doing a design like that. Let's take a look. Here I am on the other side of the berm. This is the retaining earth for this space here. The pond is upslope, obviously, I think. And I made the decision as we were building this pond, I think unfortunately, incorrectly, I could say, of, hey, I really don't want to clear all the trees in here. I don't want to do a clear cut in order to do this pond. Let's just kind of tuck it in amongst the trees. We had to clear a few. We dug out the root systems of an ash in here, a couple pines on the far end, but here's the cedar, really nice looking white pine that's got a good form to it. Oh, let's just leave them in the berm and let the pond be really feeling like it's tucked into that context. And you can see what's happening as a result of that. So this isn't from foot traffic or driving. This is where snow has been on dry enough, cold enough soil to freeze and remain, and wet enough seeping or weeping soil. So this is defrosted and has water moving through it because of water moving through it. And that's happening because the berm is leaking where there are trees. That's a no-brainer for folks that do pond installation professionally or have immense amount of experience, but I am profoundly a novice in lots of ways. I experiment and work, but this is, renting a machine and working with it. I feel like we did some good things, but this move, we probably should have cut these trees, probably should have removed the stumps with the machine, put them somewhere, hugel mounds, logs, lumber, brush walls, what have you, biochar. But all of these trees at some point will probably need to be cut low and then additional soil packed on top, and it will probably still weep for a number of years until that packs. In the grand scheme, I'm not that upset with it. It's fine. It's still holding an immense amount of water. It doesn't feel dangerous through here. It's just not ideal. Aesthetically, it's a little bit off. That doesn't really matter to me, but this is an access pathway. And so what I think part of the work will be today is to dig out and help the water to find a channel on the margin and reunite with the main drainage channel for the landscape, and see if that allows this to dry off a bit. Maybe in the spring we're raking off or removing a little bit of the topsoil and packing this with the clay subsoil to bring it up a bit. But the first work is to get this ditch worked out, let the water move a bit more to the boundary, to the edge, and reunite here. So this is the original drainage channel that moved through the property that the pond impedes or creates a dam to hold that water and then eventually let it out. And you can see where the snow is melted. And here it feels functional and good, clean and nice. It's running gently through lots of organic matter. That's all fine and good. We've got persimmons and pawpaws planted through here. Super happy with those species and with the idea that ash eventually, as the overstory, the ash here will most likely pass away. releasing light for those understory trees. So this part, once the water gets to here, I'm very happy with what it does. We don't need to modify. I'm going to use a lightweight shovel that happens to have holes in it. I'll put in the description. I'm not going to link to anything because I don't want to do affiliate stuff, but if you wanted to get a tool like this, but you could take an old shovel and just get a metal drill bit and drill a bunch of holes. This helps move saturated muck really nicely. Consider whatever shovel you use for this sort of work to at least have a few holes, maybe an older sacrificial one. We're going to work on digging this out a little bit. I didn't dig in here very much because there's a fair bit of roots, but I could. Maybe I'll come back to that. Same thing here. It's a little bit challenging. Pretty large old white pine right here with very shallow roots. I don't think that this pine negatively influences the water holding, but I certainly can't shear through all their roots without hurting them a lot. But you can see where the water's now getting focused and dropping to the northern line of this pathway. Not to say that that will make this all completely dry, but at least gives an opportunity for the water to get a little bit more focused and organized. And once it's here, I'm pretty happy for it to be here and just continue on without modification. Maybe I'll clean up some of the impediments, but all of that is silt catching and water filtering, and it's flowing in a good way, so why mess with it? Standing here on the retaining berm, making a couple observations that I'd love to share. One is that the berm itself, that is this right here, that is the soil, the subsoil that was excavated or moved with the skid steer and then eventually the excavator out and packed and tracked in on this end to hold back the water that's coming in. So this is responsible for holding all of this. If the water were to start flowing over the top, breaching that, it would start to erode faster and faster, and especially with intense rains and more incoming pressured water, could blow this out. And right now I'm seeing that the berm, we're at the high water and overflowing state. It's definitely fine enough, but there's some pockets right in here where a little bit of fragility is being exposed. If we had an immense amount of water coming in out of nowhere, the water level might be able to hop over that. I think we can provision for that emergency to not happen. And we would do that by assessing the designed in spillway. So the place the water would want to leave is just to go down slope and fill and overflow, waterfall and keep going. And that would be super destructive to this. So what we've done is said, okay, you can fill and then come over here, go through this debris and then come out and around the berm, through some vegetation and rocks and material, and then drain, not super aggressively, not through pipes, but out this way. And I think what I need to do is bring that spillway down a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of work in here. Some of this bulk material in here would do well to remove. I'd like to go down about a few inches or so that the pond static level can drop a few inches, which would give us a little bit more freeboard or buffering before it would want to overflow that way. Let me get into it. It's interesting to see back in here, this is acting as a really nice filter actually. It's catching a lot of leaves, so it's keeping the spillway from getting too clogged up, but it's restricting flow a bit. And then down in here, right around here is the root of this pine tree. So I'm a little restricted from going much deeper right in here, but I can at least clear a little bit off to the side and let it come through a bit more. So we'll see how that works. Not a dramatic amount of a change, mainly because it would take some pretty gnarly work to, sometimes I'll use a ground axe, so it's like an axe for splitting wood, but it's a little bit beat up, and I'll chop on one side, chop on the other, and remove a root. But this is a pretty nice older pine that is not holding back the pond from holding water. It's a great source of shade for the pond, so I really, in an ideal world, I'm not going to do much more damage than what was already done digging a pond near it. But I think what I could do, if this doesn't work well enough, is see the water level drops a bit and then get in with a smaller shovel and dig under the root so that water can flow under it. And that would allow the water level to drop to below the root line. And so more material in here, not much. I don't want to get it too crazy milky. You can see all the debris in there, the pine cones, the needles are all acting in concert to act as a silt filter. Already to here, it's a little bit less muddy and murky. By the time it gets to here, it's almost running clear again. So I don't want to interrupt that and just have it be a milkshake all the way down to the road. There's enough in here we can send a little bit more sediment and not hurt things too much, so I might do that. Cutting a little further down channel definitely draws the water down a bit more aggressively. Nothing too crazy. I'm not seeing whitewater rapids or bubbles and all that, but it's moving. And it's doing what I would like it to do, which is to spill out. So in the spirit of reducing erosive forces, whenever you can have a channel relax, make a delta, spread, and then if it needs to, become a channel again. Each time you do that sort of design, that splaying, or you make a pocket where it can dump in and then refill and go over, each of those have good positive effect on holding more nutrient and soil higher up in the landscape. So nice delta here, a little bit of a pocket to catch silt, and it flattens out again. And again, with all that material moving through it, I don't see it cutting the soil away. And in fact, by the time it gets to here, this might get a little cloudier, but if 20 feet down drainage channel, it's not running too soupy, I'm not too worried about it. So overflow brought down a little. It's a pretty significant amount of surface area that will be changing, that will be going down an inch or two to go through that channel. So I'm not going to really see that today or tomorrow, but that's why you want to do these sorts of works. Right now we had a fair bit of rain and some snow. It's going to freeze again, and so doing it before things freeze allows the moving water to continue its work. So we'll reassess this again in, I don't know, a couple of days or a week. I don't sense there being an emergency. There's no ridiculous amount of rain coming in. But this is something I want to keep my eye on. How does the spillway function? The soil above the static or designed water line of the pond, how do we keep that high enough that we're safe? The additional safeness here would come from big pieces of stone, especially in the lower spots. Lots and lots of solid herbaceous perennials that leave lots of material. So we've been adding sennas and other plants that'll just catch material if needed in an emergency. But the real work is the spillway functioning the way it ought to and being a little bit more assertive. That's what's happening here. There's certainly always more to talk about with things like this, but I feel like I've gone on enough in this video. Plus it's starting to get rainy, snowy. I might want to put my gear away and actually just work without having a camera and a tripod out. Let me know in the comments, what sort of questions do you have? Do you have concerns? I mean, certainly there's concerns around the trees and the berms. Folks commented on that before. I'm aware of it. Something to consider if you were to design a pond in the middle of a woodland context. If we had a much steeper slope, I feel like this could have been a dangerous or a very poorly executed design plan. As it stands, I think it's just suboptimal, should be modified and finalized. I'll need to figure out more soil, but it's serviceable. And if this is a beautiful full pond all winter and until June or July and then it drops a few feet, okay, that's fine for now. But do you want to see more videos in this format? I was toying with the idea of a longer form rather than high speed as I dig these trenches, maybe like a trench digging ASMR sort of videos. There's interest in that. I would do it if people wanted to see that. And what ways can I be helpful? If you're trying to hold more water in your landscape, modify how those water holding features function in the landscape, create a little bit more buffering and resilience, and just think through the dynamics of water being held, released. Let's have some dialogue in the comments. Thanks for watching.